the ceasefire is over. At least, that is what the President of the United States declared on Truth Social on the morning of July 10th, 2026. The Islamic Republic of Iran has asked us to continue talks. We have agreed to do so, but the United States has stated to them, in no uncertain terms, that the ceasefire is over. Yet even as those words were posted, Qatari mediators were landing in Tehran. American negotiators, according to a source with knowledge speaking to Axios, were preparing for a new round of talks, possibly in Switzerland, as early as next week. And the Strait of Hormuz had gone effectively dark. Lloyd's List intelligence confirmed on Thursday that no vessel above 10,000 deadweight tons had transited the U.S. coordinated southern highway near Oman, with its transponders active since July 7th. The world's most important energy choke point is not formally closed, but it is not open either. This report examines what actually happened, why the ceasefire appears to have collapsed, why talks are nonetheless restarting, and what the realistic scenarios are for what comes next. Every claim in this report is sourced. Where information comes from officials who spoke on condition of anonymity or from a single media organization, this report says so explicitly. Here is what happened, in verified sequence. June 17, 2026. President Trump and Iranian President Pezeshkian signed a memorandum of understanding to end the war and the Hormuz blockades, confirmed by multiple governments and reported across all major wire services. The MOU launched a 60-day period for negotiating a broader and permanent agreement. Late June, both sides exchanged limited strikes despite the MOU. Iran closed the strait again on June 20th, citing Israeli continued strikes in Lebanon as a violation. The U.S. military denied the claim. June 27th, the Joint Maritime Information Center announced a widened southern highway route through Hormuz near Oman, confirmed by CENTCOM's public statement. July 7th, 2 tankers were struck by projectiles in the Strait of Hormuz. The Qatari-owned LNG tanker Al Raqayyat, confirmed by Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Dr. Majid Al-Ansari, was attacked and suffered a fire in its engine room. The Saudi supertanker Wedyan, confirmed by Saudi Bari, the shipping company, was involved in a Strait of Hormuz incident. The company said the vessel and crew were safe. A third vessel was attacked within 24 hours, confirmed by the UK Maritime Trade Operations Center, which recorded the incidents. The United States Treasury immediately reimposed sanctions on Iranian oil exports. A U.S. official confirmed to NBC News the same afternoon. July 7th to 8th, CENTCOM publicly confirmed in official statements that U.S. forces struck approximately 80 Iranian military targets on July 7th, including more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps small boats. CENTCOM confirmed in a second official statement that U.S. forces struck approximately 90 Iranian military targets on July 8th, including air defense systems, coastal surveillance assets, missile and drone storage sites, naval capabilities, and military logistics infrastructure along Iran's coastline. Both strike confirmations are from CENTCOM's own public releases, not from anonymous officials. Iran responded. Bahrain's defense force confirmed in an official statement that it intercepted and destroyed Iranian aerial attacks on July 9th. Iran also struck U.S. facilities in Kuwait, Jordan, Qatar, and Iraq, according to Al Jazeera and confirmed by regional government statements. July 9th, Trump at NATO in Ankara and subsequently on Truth Social declared the ceasefire over. His exact words on Truth Social are confirmed. July 10th, a Qatari delegation traveled to Iran, confirmed by Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency and by Qatari sources speaking to ABC News. The delegation left the same day after several hours. U.S. officials told ABC News that negotiations with Iran are expected to resume. The next round, according to a source with knowledge speaking to Axios, may take place in Switzerland. Multiple officials told CNN that Washington and Tehran are working toward a nuclear deal by mid-August. Now here is the assassination intelligence. which requires careful sourcing because it is important but disputed in its specifics. The Wall Street Journal first reported, and CNN subsequently confirmed, that Israel shared intelligence with the United States this week about a new and specific Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump. Trump himself confirmed publicly on Wednesday in Ankara, "They want to take out the U.S. leader, me. I'm on every single one of their lists." However, in this matters, two U.S. officials told Israel's Channel 12 News that the information related to general dialogue between Iranian officials about potentially assassinating the president rather than a specific operational plot. One of those officials told Channel 12 that part of the intelligence community views the Israeli report, in part, as a piece of a broader Israeli effort to influence Trump's decision-making on Iran, given Netanyahu's deep opposition to the diplomatic process. The honest assessment of the assassination intelligence is this: the threat environment around Trump from Iranian actors is real and documented over years. The specific intelligence shared this week by Israel is disputed in its characterization, specific plot versus general discussion, between different U.S. intelligence assessments. This documentary cannot resolve that dispute. It can only confirm that the intelligence exists, that it was shared, and that its significance is contested. Here is the energy picture. The Strait of Hormuz carries approximately 20% of the world's oil traffic, confirmed by the Congressional Research Service, and approximately 27% of global maritime crude and petroleum products. When Iran struck the tankers on July 7th, Brent crude settled 3% higher at $74.16 per barrel, and WTI advanced 2.8% to $70.44, confirmed by CNBC. Oil held relatively steady on Friday, according to Al Jazeera, following several days of gains. That relative stability does not reflect complacency. It reflects a market that had already priced in a significant risk premium from the February-March Hormuz crisis, when, according to Wikipedia's economic impact documentation, Brent surged past $120 per barrel during the Strait's worst closure. The International Energy Agency, according to the same documentation, described that closure as the greatest global energy security challenge in history. The Lloyd's List intelligence confirmation, no large vessel transiting with transponders on since July 7th, is the most consequential single data point for commercial shipping. Shipping does not move through zones where insurance cannot be obtained at commercial rates. The question is whether the combination of U.S. military pressure and Qatari mediation can restore enough confidence for commercial transit to resume. Here is how four analytical traditions interpret what is happening. The American national security perspective, reflecting the administration's stated position, is that the July 7th to 8th strikes were proportionate responses to Iranian violations of a performance-based MOU. Trump stated explicitly on July 8th, in retribution for yesterday's bombing of ships by Iran, if it happens again, it will get much worse. CENTCOM's language in both strike confirmations used the phrase, further degrade Iran's ability to attack commercial shipping and innocent civilian mariners, a consistent stated objective. The Iranian strategic perspective, as assessed from available Iranian official statements, is that the July 7th attacks were themselves a response to U.S. sanctions reimposition and continued Israeli strikes. Iran's willingness to continue talks despite the events of this week reflects calculation rather than moderation. The European diplomatic perspective, from Brussels, London, and Paris, is that both sides are creating conditions where an accident or miscalculation could trigger a return to full-scale conflict. The concern is not primarily about legal MOU compliance. It is about structural instability of simultaneous military strikes and diplomacy. The independent strategic analyst perspective is most precisely summarized by Holger Schmieding, chief economist at Berenberg, in a research note published Friday, confirmed by CNBC. The situation around the Strait of Hormuz remains unsettled, but as we have argued since March, both sides should ultimately have an interest in containing the conflict. Ahead of the midterm elections to Congress on November 3rd, U.S. President Donald Trump wants low oil prices, whereas the Revolutionary Guards in Tehran covet the money from potential sanctions relief. That is not a quote from an anonymous official. It is a published analyst assessment from a named economist at a named institution. It is the most precise summary available of why the structural incentives point toward eventual de-escalation, even as the tactical situation points toward continued volatility. Before the conclusion, the skeptics challenge. 3 questions that challenge the dominant diplomatic optimism of the current moment. First, is the diplomacy genuine? The MOU framework survived the first round of limited violations in late June. It did not survive the July 7th tanker attacks. A new round of talks next week would be the 3rd attempt to restart a process that has already collapsed twice. Each restart requires more confidence building than the last, and confidence is exactly what the events of this week have most severely damaged. Second, could talks be buying time? An Axios source, speaking anonymously, told the outlet this week, "We're going to slap them a bit," characterizing the current escalation as frustration-driven rather than strategy-driven. A U.S. official told Axios the escalation could last a day or two, a week or a month, depending on whether Iran continues its attacks on commercial ships. That framing, a wait-and-see military posture alongside resumed diplomacy, is either managed de-escalation or controlled ambiguity. The difference matters enormously for what happens next. Third, could domestic politics on either side derail negotiations? Netanyahu, according to CNN, has voiced deep doubts about Trump's diplomatic efforts. He clashed with Trump over Israeli military action in Lebanon, which complicated the original talks. He is expected to visit Washington soon. According to CNN, Israel is not a party to the MOU or the current talks, according to the Times of Israel. But Israel's ability to complicate the diplomatic process through continued strikes, intelligence sharing, or direct lobbying of Trump is real, documented, and not resolved. Here is what can be stated with full confidence and what cannot. Confirmed by official sources, Trump Truth Social, July 10th, ceasefire over. Exact text published. CENTCOM, approximately 80 targets hit July 7th. Official public release confirmed. CENTCOM, approximately 90 targets hit July 8th. Official public release confirmed. Al-Raqayyat attack, Qatar FM confirmed. Tasnim confirmed. Wedyan incident, Saudi Bahri confirmed. Vessel and crew safe. Iran struck U.S. facilities in Bahrain. Bahrain Defense Force official statement confirmed. U.S. Treasury reimposed Iran oil sanctions. U.S. official confirmed to NBC News. Qatari delegation visited Tehran July 10th. Tasnim and ABC News confirmed. Next round of talks expected. ABC News officials confirmed. Lloyd's list intelligence. No large vessel AIS transit since July 7th. Confirmed in Lloyd's list reporting. Brent $74.16, July 7th. WTI $70.44. CNBC confirmed. Reported but with attribution and caveats. Israel shared intelligence about assassination plot. Wall Street Journal first report. CNN confirmed. White House referenced Trump's own public statement. Significance of assassination intelligence. Disputed between U.S. agencies. Channel 12 citing 2 officials questioning specificity. Next round possibly Switzerland. Axios citing source with knowledge. Mid-August nuclear deal target. CNN citing multiple officials. Israel planned to target Iranian negotiators to derail talks. Middle East Monitor citing unnamed report. Single source. Not independently verified by this documentary. Genuinely unknown. Whether talks produce a new framework or collapse. Whether the IRGC conducts further attacks during any diplomatic window. Whether Mojtaba can make the nuclear concessions Washington ultimately requires. Whether the strait can reopen for commercial shipping before insurance markets require major adjustments. Whether Israel accepts any U.S.-Iran framework that leaves Iranian nuclear infrastructure partially intact. The most defensible assessment of the current moment is this. The military phase has slowed but has not stopped. The diplomatic phase is restarting but has not started. The structural incentives, Trump's need for lower oil prices, Iran's need for sanctions relief, point toward eventual de-escalation. But structural incentives and tactical decisions are not the same thing. And the tactical decisions of the next 72 hours will be made by people operating under extraordinary pressure, with imperfect information, and in an environment where the gap between a managed de-escalation and a return to full-scale conflict has rarely been narrower. The coming days will be shaped less by battlefield developments than by what is said in closed rooms in Doha, Islamabad, and possibly Geneva, and by whether the parties can build enough mutual confidence in a process that has already collapsed twice to give it a third chance. I am the Anglosphere Report. The stories your local media won't connect. Tell me in the comments. Do you think diplomacy still has a realistic chance of succeeding? Or has the region entered a new phase of long-term strategic competition that no single agreement can resolve? See you next time.